Simone, you are live. You are live.
Welcome everybody today to our 11 a.m. dive of diveLIVE. I am Simone, your underwater biologist. Today I've got Emil on camera and I have Pat on the surface ready to send all the questions to you. Now, we did miss our 7 a.m. dive, but luckily our technical guru Peter has hopefully solved all of our problems, so we get to enjoy this second dive with you today. Now, don't forget to hashtag diveLIVE on Twitter, comment in the YouTube stream, and also comment on the Facebook stream as well, so you can get all your questions answered. Today I'm going to be hopefully looking for a couple crustaceans and even a conch shell or two, and maybe some garden eels. But tell us what you guys want to see today.
Yes, welcome everybody. Now, Simone is diving today off Casuarina Point, which is in front of Don Foster's Dive Centre on the western side of Grand Cayman Island. So, Simone, what depth are you at right now?
So I'm quite shallow at the moment. I'm only at 9.5 meters. So that's about 30 foot. And the water temperature today is 28 degrees Celsius, about 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a little bit warm and I'm loving the warmth. And I am going to go a little bit deeper today. So I'm not sure how long this dive will be, but I'll try not to breathe too much for you.
So there is a direct relationship between depth that you're at and the pressure. So the more pressure there is, then the more compressed the air is going to be, so you're going to use air faster, which is why when we go shallow we generally take longer dives, and when we go deeper it'll be a little bit shorter.
I think Emil has spotted an amazing lionfish.
Yes, there's actually two lionfish right here, so one very close to us and one off to the right too.
Well, oh, not so beautiful. It's a, deadly beauty. They are an invasive species, so they're not supposed to be here. But they do look quite large, so they are adults and most likely well fed. Oh, he's showing us his face. Now, normally they would actually face their spines towards us, but now we get to see this beautiful lionfish's face.
Yes, they are shy, I suppose you could say, in that they quite often cover themselves with their spines, but this is a defense mechanism. They don't have many predators because of this, because, I mean, really, when you look at that, where are you going to bite from and not get a mouthful of spines?
Yeah, I would definitely not want to be poked. You know when you get like a crunchy chip and you poke the roof of your mouth? I think this might be a little bit worse. Now, not many predators here can actually eat lionfish, so that's why they are so influential in shaping the environment. But there have been reports of some of the fish here learning how to eat them. So there is a hope that their population will reduce. Now they are such fearsome predators, so they can just demolish the small, beautiful fish that we get to see on the top of these reefs. Lauren was telling me that there was one specimen that had 50 different species of fish in his stomach at one time.
Yes, they're really, really not picky about what they eat, and you can kind of see it now that they have a very, very rounded mouth that extends and protrudes quite far from their face. So it's easy for them to ambush or come up behind prey and just gulp them in without a second thought.
Yeah, they can protrude their jaws so far. Now, I want to tell you guys that there are some mutton snappers hanging around us. And this is because they know people hunt these animals. So to reduce lionfish population numbers, divers have there's an amazing initiation to hunt these animals, and they use their flesh for tacos. And they don't waste the fish, but mutton snappers will hang around because they have learned that divers can shoot them. So if the mutton snapper is really, really quick, he'll actually steal the food.
Yes, and sometimes the divers will just leave them for the mutton snappers, which isn't exactly a bad thing, because it's still being eaten. It's still going back into the ecosystem, and the energy transfer is still being kept in the water.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cycle. You want to keep all of this healthy molecules and all of that in the environment. And I hope you guys are getting a really cool shot of the facial cirri, the little kind of beard that they have. they're quite flamboyant, and in some places of the world, especially the Red Sea, they're actually called turkey fish. And I think that kind of makes a little bit more sense than a lionfish, but...
Maybe we could eat those on Thanksgiving instead.
Yeah, it definitely would be a very, very good environmental change. Now, the spines as well can be used for jewellery. So that's also a way that you can reduce the population numbers, you know, by using them as almost an export. But you guys must be thinking, how did these animals get here? The ocean is so big. Well, some people think that aquariums had actually released some of their lionfish when they didn't want to take care of them anymore. So that is one way. But another way is they think they hitched a ride in the ballast water of ships. So ships hold water in the kind of undersides, if you will, and they think maybe they came that way.
And also, just on that, we have a question from Angie asking where they came from, and they are native to the Indo-Pacific region, so quite a way away from here.
Yeah, definitely very far from here. So I can only imagine what the first reef creature was thinking when these guys popped up. But yeah, they have thrived. And it's amazing. They come out at night to hunt, also at sunset, so they aren't purely nocturnal animals. But that's why we always find them in the undersides and underhangings of caves, because they're just a little bit more relaxed under there during the daytime.
And they're very, very, very beautiful animals. You can see on the spines there that the white, feathery, lace-like material coming off almost reflects light in a rainbow pattern. So sometimes if you get the lighting just right, it can actually look like they are radiating rainbows from their spines.
Yeah, and also in their rays, when light penetrates through the rays, so they have the spines at the front and then the rays further on the back. When the light goes through there, it creates a rainbow pattern. So it's really beautiful for underwater photographers. Now we're going to leave these guys alone, come a little bit off the sand, and go over the reef crest.
That sounds great. Now, Simone, Liz is asking, just while we're looking for stuff, how do you get into marine biology, and has being on diveLIVE helped with it?
How did I get into it? Well, I've always wanted to be a marine scientist since I was a little girl. My dad was a surfer. Unfortunately, I wasn't that athletic. So I started hanging out at rock pools and just seeing what I could find. And then just from there, I always wanted to become a diver. It's a really awesome organization in Mozambique. So when I turned 18, I went to Mozambique and volunteered for an awesome organization documenting manta rays and whales. And I thought, if I like this, then I want to have that marine science job, and I loved it. And here I am after studying it and working around the world. So if you're interested in it, you know, you can do anything. You can reach out to community groups. If you want to study it, there are even online courses for free that you can do to learn more. And what about you, Pat? How did you get into it?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty similar to Simone. You know, it's something I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. And living in the country for a while, it was a bit hard to get into it, but I eventually knuckled down and got into a university in Adelaide, South Australia. And since then, it's just become my life. It's something that the more you know, the more you learn, the more you want to know. And definitely being here on diveLIVE has kind of forced us to expand our knowledge in marine biology. So this job has definitely helped with progressing our careers.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have ever really been into the Caribbean before or worked in the Caribbean. So, you know, reef life is just so different all over the world. When we came here, we really had to knuckle down, as it were, do lots of dives and just understand what different species of fish lived here. Because, you know, fish ecology is relatively similar as a whole, but each individual species has so much. I mean, there's so much evolutionary difference, behavioral difference. So it really helped us, I think, really expand our knowledge. So very, very cool.
Yes, definitely, and it's how could you want to study anything else, I think? Now, Kevin was asking just which dive site we're diving on. So just to clarify, we are at Casuarina Point, which is on the western side of Grand Cayman, down the bottom of the western side. And Simone is about 100 metres or 320 feet offshore, right out the front of our good friends here at Don Foster's Dive Centre.
Yeah, and the visibility today is really, really lovely. I would probably say about 20 to 25 meters, so I hope it looks nice and clear to you. You might see a few bits of plankton kind of coming towards the camera, but besides that, it's really lovely. So that means there's not too much food in the water for the fish, but they're still going to be hanging around.
Yes, and
Now maybe we'll come down here, because I feel like there are lots of cleaning stations. And by cleaning stations, I mean an aggregation of small fish that pick parasites off the bigger fish. So hopefully the bigger fish come by.
yes, the concept of cleaning stations does sound quite strange, but it is something that once you visually see it, it all makes sense very, very quickly.
It does, and they're so vital. I mean, if you guys just see all these tiny fish up on the reef. So I think right now you've probably got a parrotfish and a chub on your...
Yes, so the chub is right in the middle there, that's just following along with us now. So that is that a brassy chub, I believe? Or a Bermuda chub. There's two very, very, very similar looking species here on the reef, so that's either the Bermuda chub or the brassy chub.
Yeah, and there's lots of small fish around here. But over here, Emil, we have this beautiful barrel sponge, but on top of the barrel sponge, it looks like there is some juvenile bluehead wrasse. The reason I want to say this is because, I mean, individuals look so different from their parents, so I wanted to give you an idea of what some juveniles might actually look like.
Oh yes, so just on top of that big barrel sponge there, so the little yellow striped fish are juvenile bluehead wrasse. Now you might think it's pretty strange that they're called bluehead, seeing as there's no blue on them whatsoever, but that is because they are in their initial phase, which means that they are not sexually mature males. So most of them will be females right now when they're in this phase. And once the dominant male is eliminated or for some reason is moved away from this territory, then one of these females will actually start to metamorphosize and turn into a dominant male with a big blue head, which really stands out. So if we see a male bluehead wrasse, we'll point it out to you.
Yeah, we can see they're all hanging out in this one spot. So that means that the terminal male is not going to be too far away. So I do hope that he's going to poke his head out in a display of, you know, I'm over here. I actually see one over here, so maybe he's going to come over when he realizes that we might be checking out his fine ladies. Oh, squid.
Ooh.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, how lovely. I love squid. They're very, very cute.
Oh yes, so right in the center here with the strangely oscillating fins there, that is a squid, a Caribbean reef squid to be specific. And it's doing a little dance for us right now. I'm not sure what the purpose of this is.
So he's by himself. I can't see any other squid around. He's going to be changing his colours very, very effectively. Did you see the sheen of his eyes?
Yes, yes, you can see, even though it's not very close to us or close to the camera, you can still see just how spectacular its colours are.
Yeah, and their colour-changing organs are actually connected kind of to their eyesight. So when they see certain colours that they want to camouflage in, they use their eyesight to indicate that. But I think he's just met up with his buddy.
Oh, nice.
All right, well, we might leave them alone. They're off into the distance now.
Just quickly on that colour change thing, so the most spectacular thing is that despite only being able to see in black and white, these squids still manage to use their eyesight to change colours. And now there's a bit of a theory behind this that if you take a blurred photo of something black, you can start to see the colours kind of smudging off it. So they believe that the shape of the squid's pupil also does this. So even though they see in black and white, they can still recognise different hues of colour.
It's absolutely insane how the eye has developed, not only in the terrestrial landscape, but also the aquatic. I mean, you can imagine when we come down here without goggles, I don't know about you, but I can't see much besides blur. And my eyes are stinging. So they obviously have to have very different eyesight to us to be able to see in this binocular color vision or non-color, depending on the organism. It's really profound because the eye is the most complex organ we've seen on the face of the planet. It's pretty amazing stuff. And when it comes to vision of fish, a lot of fish can move their eyes independently from each other. So it's like getting two video feeds in at the same time and processing it, whilst pretty much having a 180-degree view. I mean, yeah, they can see it all. A lot of them also have different types of, we have rods and cones in our eyes. They have extras. So this means they can see colors that we have never even imagined. It's profound. And imagine if a fish looks at another fish. We think they might look the exact same. They might be, you know, an absolute magenta color, whilst we only see a boring black color. It's pretty cool. Now we're making our way over the reef crest, and we're actually heading to a sandier patch soon.
Great. So sandier patches is where we can expect to see some bigger, more visible animals such as stingrays and nurse sharks, and even an eagle ray if we're really lucky.
Yeah, and it is the Queen's birthday today, which actually means that there's not too many divers out. So hopefully all of the larger things are going to be a little bit more relaxed because they haven't been, you know, aware of divers around.
And don't forget, if you're watching along, please send in any questions. I know when I'm diving around here that there's a lot of curious things that I want to know about, and so if anything like that prompts you, just ask away. As we have, this looks like a different species of porcupine
very
fish.
Small. It's a very little baby. It's probably about 3 inches or so long pufferfish. It's still got the spine, so people believe it is a porcupine, but you can see in the eyes, they are a lot greener.
Well, they're coming across as like almost like an opal from what we're
that's
seeing.
Exactly what it looks like. Yeah, almost speckled, right?
Yeah, it looks quite beautiful.
So, like I said, this is a bit of a juvenile on the reef, so I'm not sure he's seen many fellow divers before.
Now, I think this might actually be a striped burrfish, not a porcupine fish.
Ah, yes, a burrfish. Good one. So, as you can imagine, they are quite closely related, but different fish. I think the porcupine fish has a more segmented tail. But absolutely adorable. It can still take in some water and expand.
Yeah, it's really the master of dispense, this fish, because as Simone said, it can puff up and inflate and expand, and this erects all the spines. But not only are the spines there, they also have a venom that is produced not actually by the organism itself, but by a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that it hosts within its body. So this bacteria produces a toxin, which is able to, obviously, if anything attacks it, it's going to get a spine and a toxin. So it's really defensively sound.
Yeah, and we were talking about fish vision before. These guys have the ability to move their eyes independently. You can see how far away each eye is from the other. So that means that they're not, you know, constantly looking forward, they're constantly looking around. They are more prioritized about predator evasion than about food location. So they can move their eyes kind of like this and see if something's coming from the top, the bottom, or from the front and back. It's pretty cool. It would be very hard to sneak up on a fish like this. So we'll keep on heading down. We're almost at the sandy patch, but we're actually following a very beautiful channel that is winding its way through the corals. Now, the way the reefs are shaped, it's almost like fingers reaching out into the sand, so you can almost always know how to get back home.
Yes, and this is because of wave action. So the wave action will draw all the sand into the channels, and as the waves are coming straight onto the shoreline, then that's why the channels are also facing the shoreline. And it's also super important for sediment transportation. So reefs, corals, and a lot of the organisms that construct the structure of a reef are all made of calcium carbonate. And when calcium carbonate gets broken down by being bored into or settled on or broken or dying, then it collects as sand, and it collects in this channel. Now, it either does one of two things here. It's either transported out to the wall that's about 400 metres or 1,200 feet offshore, or it is goes through a process of lithification and is turned back into rock, which then the reef builds on. What have we seen, Simone?
Look at the veal, and he's always pointing at something. We have a huge barracuda hiding within some gorgonians.
Oh yes, so it's still a little bit in the distance. So the furthest gorgonian, which is that plant-like structure that you can see, there's a large fish hanging very, very still just above it, and that is a barracuda. More specifically, the great barracuda, one of the 30-odd species of barracuda in the sea.
Yeah, he's very, very relaxed. So this is why we come back to the sandy patch, because there are a few larger species out here. Now this barracuda is probably about 2.5 to 3 foot. They can't get much bigger.
So that's almost a full metre in length. And you might notice that it's quite a pale colour right now, and that is because it's on a sandy habitat. So when they're on the sand, they will change colour of their flesh to look a lot more lighter and brighter to camouflage with the sand. And if you were to watch this swim from the sand over to a darker environment, such as a coral reef, you'll actually notice that they start to go bluer and bluer. Or darker and darker. This is also when they're in the pelagic zone where there's a lot of blues. They'll go darker to blend in with that bluish hue of the water.
He's changing his colours right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You're seeing this.
Yes.
He's making the top of his body much darker in a hope to blend in. I think he realises that we are not trying to eat him. So he's being nice and relaxed in front of the camera.
Yeah. That is incredible.
And these are some of the most fearsome predators on the reef. You can see he's shaped exactly like a torpedo. That means he is built for speed.
Yes, very streamlined and very muscular. So they can just cruise through the water, and they've got very, very long, very sharp teeth. They look like little razors, and they can use this to either A, just completely break the fish in half and stop it from moving, or B, at least hold the fish in its mouth long enough for it to die and for it to be eaten.
Glorious, yeah, and now it's completely darkened its body to fit back into the reef system, because it is moving off of the sand. Now this is the evil predator from Nemo, who ate all of Nemo's brothers and sisters as the egg. And chances are he wouldn't want to eat that. He'd actually go for fish and not eggs.
So you can see it's just using the pectoral fins, which are the fins on its side there, just to stabilise itself. But where it generates most of its power from is from moving its big, muscular, torpedo-like body from side to side. If you watch them do that rapidly, you'll see them move extremely quickly.
Yeah, and there is anecdotal evidence that barracudas have bitten divers. I promise you, there's no confirmed evidence of this, and if it was just an accident.
Yes, they do believe that the shiny objects sometimes that divers may wear do attract the barracuda. Maybe they think it's a little fish, like a little silverside or a pilchard or a sardine, and so they will get confused and attack that, and in the process maybe may hit the diver. But that's really the only reason why this animal would attack a diver.
Yeah, they do have quite large teeth as well. About an inch or so. They can get up to an inch or so. And the adults generally hang around on a reef individually. But as juveniles, they do create those big schools that you guys sometimes see. So this is an adult. enjoying the solitude of the reefs. Now let me see. Oh wow, we have a huge amount of Creole wrasse just up ahead.
Now, we do apologise if you hear some voices in the background. We are operating out the front of Don Foster's Dive Centre, and they do sometimes have classes on, so we do hear a little bit of noise in the background, but that's fine.
Yeah, we have to work out of, a working dive centre because the amount of support Don Foster's gives us is crazy. They supply pretty much all of our tanks, and they give us the best ideas of where to go and what to show you guys on the reef.
And they've also just been great people in general. So we got another Barracuda here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the same one. I actually think it's a different one. So you can see that they really do enjoy hiding in these gorgonians. So the gorgonians are the plant-like structures that we see in front of it.
You can see it just sitting there very still. It's not doing a very good job of looking like a gorgonian, but I'm sure in his mind he's doing it great.
Yeah, he certainly is not. But you can see how still this fish is. So he's not hunting, he's almost sleeping. Almost like a resting phase.
Yeah, and it does look, was that one smaller than the last one we saw, Simone?
Yeah, so I think that one was probably only a foot and a half. Still quite small, but still a reproductively active adult. Now maybe what we'll do is we'll go up ahead and check out some garden eels. How does that sound?
Ooh, yes, we know that Simone loves her garden eels. So
definitely do. Oh.
Just for everyone to know what to be on the lookout for, a garden eel is, well, we can see it right here in the centre of screen. So they're these little black fingers that are sticking up out of the sand. So they are a species of eel.
Yeah, now there's only a small group here, but maybe if we try... Oh, I see some jawfish. Some jawfish. Oh, all right, Emil's seen something. Oh, they're too far. Let's try. All right, we've got two huge eagle rays in the distance, guys. Absolutely ginormous. But they might be too far.
Please, Poseidon, let them change course and come over to us.
Yeah, eagle rays do love the sandy bottoms. This is exactly where they want to feed, because it is such a good place for them to find crustaceans.
Yep, wow. So we can just start to see it now, just over the sand off in the distance there. Oh, and the second one too. Oh, yes, we're getting a nice look now.
All right, I'm trying to help Emil. Wow, they are huge. The front one is probably one of the biggest eagle rays I've ever seen.
That is beautiful.
It might be too far.
Look at them just gracefully splashing through the water using those big triangular wings, just like a bird.
Yeah, they do. They glide exactly like birds. And they have a very large mouth, like a big smile that they use to crush any crustaceans they find. Now I think we've reached the end of our line.
Yes, unfortunately, I was waiting for that to happen. Every time we have gotten an eagle ray so far on Dive Live, they have just been that little bit out of reach. And then every single time we end up going to the end of our cable. So it is unfortunate, but at least we did get to see them.
Yeah, you guys did get to see them a little bit.
Yeah. So we got a good view of both of them there for a little bit.
Oh, well, now you guys understand why we like to come down to this part of the reef. Because we do get these passers-by. A lot of time in the deep, you don't have, kind of still animals. You get those big eagle rays. I mean, obviously you have all of these garden eels that I hope you get to see as well. But yeah, lots of passers-by. Now because of that, it has taken me to about 15 meters. Now when I started, I was about at 8. And I am at 100 bar, so half a tank. That doesn't mean we can't stay down here for quite a while. I can still show you those garden eels, because now I'm actually in the center of garden eel territory.
Yes, we can see there's thousands behind you right now.
So let's maybe just have a rest. And who knows, maybe those eagle rays will fly overhead.
Oh, we can only pray to Poseidon that that's going to happen. So these eagle rays, they do not actually have... Sorry, I'm getting mixed up now. These garden eels do not actually have scales. So they are still technically fish. They are part of the bony fish family, but they do not have scales. So this allows them to move very efficiently in and out of these little burrows. So they're coming out of the sand right now, and they're not actually buried in the sand. They have these tiny little burrows that they live in.
Yeah, they do. They very rarely leave their burrows, only when they're checking for chicks. So if they do spot a female, maybe, 3 meters away, they'll come out of their burrow and scooch over 10 centimeters. Keep on scooching until they get really, really close, and then they'll start making love. Now, they don't mate for life by any means. That can happen quite a lot, and there isn't really any parental care. But you can see that they like to hang out in these huge kind of acres of their communities, and they always face into the current to feed, right? So if one is facing the other way, so everyone's facing this way and one is facing this way, it means they're probably going to have a fight. So it's not too hard to spot if there's action about.
And why they are all facing the same ways is because whatever direction the current's moving, all of the plankton is also going to be moving that direction, because plankton are defined on the fact that they cannot fight the current. So whatever ways the current's moving, all of the plankton are going to be moving that way too. So it makes sense that all of these garden eels have their head facing into the current so they can catch these plankton at will.
Yeah, garden eels have amazing depth perception and binocular vision, because you can imagine if your food is flying at you at a pretty fast pace, you've got to be quite quick, especially when there are about thousands of your same species around you. You kind of need to really be able to get to the goods quickly. So their vision is absolutely immaculate.
And we actually have a couple of questions coming in on the garden eels. So the first one's from Lady Starfire, asking if they stay in their burrows their entire life. And as far as I know, yes, there's not many circumstances in which they actually leave them, except for, as Simone said, to mate. And the second question is from Museum Knitter. She's asking, what is making these piles of sand on the bottom? Well, that's actually really interesting. So these piles of sand are generally made by predators or looking through the sand. So the hogfish or a stingray will quite often sniff through the sand, and then they will dig it up and filter it through their gills. So stingrays will often leave quite a big mound, or not a mound, sorry, a depression, kind of like a little concave in the sand, and hogfish will leave a pile up, or goatfish as well sometimes tend to leave a pile up if they find a lot in the sand that they're sifting through.
Yeah, there's so much that sifts through the sand to get food. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, the undulating sands of the bottom are always changing. Now, I do have a little friend in front of me. This is the conch shell. Now, it looks kind of like it's just a boring dead shell, but this conch shell has a little snail friend inside. So keep an eye down this way, because he might poke his eyes out, okay?
And are they feather duster worms growing off the shell there, Simone?
Yes, they are. So because they are such sessile sedentary, well, not sessile, they do move, but very slowly. A lot of things can grow on them, specifically sponges as well. So yeah, you can actually see that these calcareous tubes going off of the shell, it's actually worms. The worms have a very calcareous tube in protection, and at the tip, they have their feeding appendages out. As you can imagine, it doesn't stop the snail from moving very much, because they don't move too much or very fast anyway. But the face of the snail is facing towards you right now.
Yeah, so sometimes when we have a view of this conch like this, that little hole in the opening there will have a little siphon coming out of it, and this is what the snail will use for locating food and predators and movement. And then underneath they have, oh no, we can see the siphon now, so that little tube's poking out now, that is their siphon, which is their sensory organ. Then underneath they have a foot, which is just a big flat surface that they use to pull themselves along the sand. And they also have a mouth with radula. And radula are essentially just modified teeth. And it's really interesting. Each different species has different shaped radula depending on what they use to feed. So some have little flat crushing ones, some can have really kind of sharp, almost blender-like ones that they use for algae. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, so they'll be coming out at night to feed on algae, these little guys. And conchs are some of the Caribbean's most favourite food sources. So the conch export is absolutely huge, even though they are endangered animals. But they can get as much as 2 kilos. That's 4.5 pounds. That's how big these snails can get. So, and they've actually been really popular in recent scientific journals in probably the past about month. So what happened was they actually transplanted the memory from one snail to another. That's insane, right?
That's crazy. And how did that pan out?
Marine gastropods. Oh, he's just moving there. They use these marine gastropods for cranial studies because their way of remembering or memory storage is very similar to ours. So never discard your little underwater brethren here. They can probably study for an exam much better than you can. And you can see he's actually moving there. So he has a very strong foot under him that makes him able to slide across.
Yeah, so we can see that foot coming out now, just underneath the siphons there. Oh, and there we go. So it's almost got a limp rather than a walk. And now...
a gangster limp, for sure.
James was asking, what's the average lifespan of a conch? So they can live from 20 to 30 years. And to reach full size, so this one here probably isn't even full size yet, but they can take 3 to 5 years to reach full size and sexual maturity. So being such a long-lived gastropod and being so heavily fished, we can see how that might start to affect its population numbers.
Yeah, and the amount of extraction that's going on around the Caribbean for these animals is absolutely insane. I was reading something like 45,000 kilograms in 1 year of these animals was taken, not including the shell. This is just the actual snail animal. A year in, I think it could have been Cuba. So that's one country, and that is absolutely millions of these. And as Pat was saying, they only reach sexual maturity in about 5 to 7 years. So when they're little, and this one is not very big at all, about my hand size, so it can definitely get bigger than that. You know, they've really got not too much of a chance. But they are very sweet, and when they poke their eyes out, it's one of my favorite things. And sometimes they can actually pick up a couple hitchhikers. Even crustaceans like crabs have been seen to ride on the back of these shells. And the crabs have been using pieces of hydroids, which are almost like a jellyfish in coral form. Let's give that a very loose description there. And they've been holding these sticks almost like fishing rods. So you have on a snail a crab that is fishing for food. So they're almost like the underwater boats. And when this beautiful animal passes away, a hermit crab will most likely make his big shell its new home. So it's this constant cycle of life that we have down here. Anyway, we'll probably let this little guy go. I'm sure he's on a mission somewhere.
Yeah, it's a very, very slow mission.
Definitely. Now we'll head a little bit shallower. I still have 80 bar left, so I can stay down for quite a while. So we'll come on off the sand and head back to the reef.
And just one last question here on the conch shell. So Liz was asking, do they change shells throughout their lifetime to accommodate for their size? And no, they don't. So this is seen in hermit crabs, but generally in gastropods, they secrete their own shell from their mantle. So they continually kind of grow with their shells.
Yeah, so snails produce their own shells, whereas hermit crabs, this is why hermit crabs are not true crabs, because they cannot produce their own shell very efficiently. So we have the normal crabs that we see on land, produce their own shell. Hermit crabs do not.
Just a quick apology to anyone who heard that plane flying overhead. It appears we're in the flight path of some flights here, so we occasionally get that happen. A further apology to anyone who is asking questions on YouTube right now. For some reason, they are not showing up on the chat. So if you want to ask on Twitter using the hashtag diveLIVE or Facebook, then we'll definitely get your questions there.
Yeah, I would love to hear the questions and answer them, so it makes me feel very smart and knowledgeable.
Yeah, there's not many moments where Simone feels that way.
Now you can see it's a quick transformation from the sand to the coral reefs that we have here. And does anyone notice how much the fish life just kind of rises? So there's just so many more fish here because they can hide away in the coral very effectively.
Yes, generally in the marine environment with a more complex topography, meaning more cracks and crevices and holes in whatever substrate it is, generally you will notice an increase in biodiversity, meaning the amount of species there, because it does do things like provides hiding spots for both ambush predators and for prey to escape their predators at the same time. It also traps food, it reduces the effects of water currents and wave action. So it really does make an ideal environment for lots of smaller creatures.
Yeah, there are loads of cracks and crevices, but it's awesome because it's almost like a shift change at night. When the sun goes down, obviously nocturnal animals come out, right? So during the day, they almost have this shift of, all right, I'll use your sleeping cave, and I'll use your sleeping cave. So it almost allows double the amount of animals to reside in one place, because you have this constant shift. It's pretty cool. Yeah, now we are on top of the reef, where we are seeing a lot of gorgonians, and specifically this pinnacle up ahead, you can see there are hundreds of chromis. So maybe a little bit to your right.
Yes, they're not showing up right now. And just quickly to all of the people watching on YouTube, the chat is now working so we can see your questions.
Sounds good. So at this pinnacle, this will definitely be some sort of cleaning station because of not only all the chromis, but just lots of little tiny wrasse.
For anyone who's not sure, the chromis that Simone is talking about are the blue chromis, which are the tiny little blue fish with the deeply forked black tail. And there's quite a few around.
And I know the sun, well, I've noticed that the sun has come out, so I hope the colours down here are standing out for you, because it is, the reefs are very, very bright. There's a lot of colours. Especially a lot of reds, which is curious because red is the first colour that you do lose.
A question here from Eloise asking whether fish hunt in packs. And yes, they most definitely do. Not all fish, but a lot of species are known to school. So schooling is when fish come together to hunt and feed. And so they do this because more or less just strength in numbers. If one fish spots some prey or a nice food item, then everything spots it. So they can all move together and hunt more effectively, more eyes on the water.
Now we have a huge terminal parrotfish just up ahead. So that's the big blue parrotfish that is making his way around the reef to feed. Now we always talk about parrotfish, but we very rarely get an awesome view of the mature males.
So we can tell this one is a mature male because it's quite brightly coloured and is a lot bigger than the other ones that we see around the reef.
have two large tiger groupers up in the distance. We're going to see if we can show you before it's time to head up and do my safety stop. Do tell me if you do get a view of these large tiger groupers.
Yes, so we can see them now, and there's no questioning as to why they're tiger groupers. We can see those distinct white stripes running along its body. And it's got that big, robust jaws that they can use to just grab prey and never let them go.
And their body is absolutely huge. So these are some of the top predators, or the apex predators on the reef. You can see the stillness of the one that we see with his face up and his tail down. He's telling someone, hey, come and clean me.
Yes. So this is the cleaning station that Simone has referred to a few times throughout this dive. And this is pretty much seeing it in action. So that grouper stayed there nice and still with its tail pointed down, and we couldn't actually see it, but I'm sure there was fish on the other side of it cleaning it. Which means that they're eating parasites off the skin. That's what we refer to when we talk about cleaning.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times an animal has to visit cleaning stations is pretty crazy, especially if there is a small wound. There's been studies. Oh, I hope you can see the way that he's moving his mouth. So there's definitely an animal in there busy cleaning whatever is in his mouth and gills.
I think it just ate that animal.
Sorry, what was that, mate?
It looked like it ate it and swallowed it.
Yeah, so they have signed a deal with the devil. So there's small animals that do climb inside a huge predator's mouth. They have signed a deal saying, hey, you don't eat me, then I'll clean you.
And Stacey just wants to know, Simone, how big are these tiger grouper?
So they're both similar sizes, probably about 2.5 foot. But I can see that they're giving Emil a run for his money when it comes to swimming. He's having a bit of a workout. Now here is a juvenile one. This is a smaller one. This is not the original two tiger groupers. This is another. But it's still displaying its striped pattern. Oh, wow.
And Simone and I have been working a long time on actually pronouncing these guys' names right. So for some reason over in Australia, we call these guys gropers, which obviously sounds a bit worse than grouper.
Yes, a lot of people were quite shocked when they would hear us say the name. Now these guys have quite large teeth because they are such fearsome predators. So they also need to keep their teeth nice and clean. So these cleaner fish act like the dentists of the reef as well by keeping their teeth sparkling fresh. So you can imagine if you had any tooth problems on the reef, there was no one going to put some braces on you, are there?
And we have a question here coming from... Sorry, let me find it. So it was from Jacqueline, and she was saying that in the US they have largemouth bass, and they actually look very similar to the grouper, and she wanted to know whether they were related, and I'm not actually too sure on that. I know that groupers are closely related to the sea basses, so if this largemouth bass is a marine bass, then they would be somewhat related.
Yeah, bass and groupers are very closely related animals, so they definitely could be related. When they did evolve, they did separate into freshwater and marine species, so they still will be closely related, whether it is a freshwater animal or not. But it is time for me, let me get away from the camera, it is time for me to do my safety stop. So guys, thank you so much for joining me on the journey. I'm glad that we got to see 2 eagle rays. That was pretty phenomenal. Hopefully next time they'll come closer. But I hope you enjoyed, and send us anything you want to see next time. I want to say thank you to the Hungarian Emil for being able to show you all the amazing things I wanted to. And thank you to Pat for helping me out from the surface. We'll see you tomorrow at our normal times of 7 a.m. Caymanian and 11 a.m. Caymanian time.
Thank you, Simone. That was a great dive. Thank you for everyone for joining in. We'll see you back here tomorrow for another underwater adventure.